Absolute Batman Annual 1 just dropped, and oh man, you guys are not ready, but let's get into it. What's up, everybody? The last few issues of Absolute Batman have been completely insane. And this latest issue, Absolute Batman Annual 1, which is actually the first issue not written by Snyder, just keeps that party going. The book is actually made up of two separate stories, but each build on the backstory and psychology that make up this beast of a Batman. We're going to touch on the second story as well, but our focus is going to be on the first by Daniel Warren Johnson. And that's because this story really gives us some important pieces for absolute Bruce Wayne and the rage that seems to be driving him throughout his life. So with that understood, the issue opens up with two separate flashbacks for Absolute Batman. The first being in the Wayne home between a young Bruce and his father, and the second group of images being a foreshadowing for what's to come in this story. We see young Bruce peering over his father's Gotham Globe newspaper with the headline that says, "Extremist Bombing," and he asks his father, "Why did they do that, Dad?" And his father replies, "I wish I knew, Bruce." The conversation between Bruce and his father then continue across multiple panels as we see men trying to escape an inferno and Thomas Wayne trying to explain difficult times to his son. Bruce asks his dad, "What do we do? How do we make them stop?" And Thomas tells him, "I don't know. I'm just one person. I don't know how to fix the world, but I know what I'm good at: teaching. Every student I meet, I know I have a chance to make a difference in their life. So maybe someday one of my students won't make the same mistakes these people made." As again, we see a foreshadowing image of Absolute Batman standing amongst the flames. We then see Thomas ruffle Bruce's hair as he playfully says, "And what about you, kiddo?" And as we see Thomas finish by saying, "What will you do?" we get a foreshadowing full-page image of Absolute Batman holding a flamethrower standing amongst flames with corpses all around him. So I guess that answers that question, and it really gives us a bigger look at how far Absolute Batman is willing to go to do what he feels his father couldn't do. It also shows us this dude's rage has a very high ceiling. But like I said, that's a foreshadowing image, and on the next page we get the beginning of the events that lead to Absolute Batman torching the extremist group's headquarters. We see Bruce roll up to Slaughter Swamp in an old truck, which is on the outskirts of Gotham's city limits. And as he passes by, he looks down on a homeless encampment there where we see a priest tending to the poor. Bruce makes eye contact with the priest before continuing on to this rundown pawn shop, which is his actual destination. Now, this priest becomes an incredibly important piece of Bruce's backstory, and you will find out why in just a second. But before we see what happens next, if you're looking for your next favorite game, you need to check out War Thunder, who we're excited to have as today's sponsor. If you've never played, War Thunder is a wild, free-to-play, larger-than-life multiplayer action-themed game that allows you to go to battle with amazing tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships within different major theaters of war across multiple locations around the world. And I'm talking both iconic machines and lesser-known prototypes from the mid-20th century all the way to the present. But that's only the beginning of the war toys, my friends, because in War Thunder, guided missiles, smoke screens, night vision devices, reconnaissance and strike drones, and even a nuclear strike that can flatten the entire map are all on the table. In fact, War Thunder recently released their Tusk Force update, which enhanced the graphics and physics of the game, added several long-awaited vehicles like the BM Oplot T tank, the Buk M3 SAM system, and Hornet fighters, to name a few. The update also added completely reworked versions of fan-favorite maps, Poland and Eastern Europe. You can download War Thunder for free right now on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. And by using our link in the description, all new players and those who haven't played War Thunder for half a year or more will receive some special bonuses, including 100,000 Silver Lions, a special Decorator Eagle of Valor, and more. You can also download War Thunder Mobile for free on iOS or Android and battle it out on the go. Link for that is in the description as well, so we'll see you on the battlefield. Alright, so diving back into the issue, we return to Bruce, who's met with the owner of an old pawn shop in Slaughter Swamp. As Bruce is getting out of his truck, he says, "Sorry, long drive from Gotham." And as the shop owner lights a cigarette, he responds, "Come on in then, city boy." He then leads Bruce inside, where he begins to show him all the weapons and ammunition that he has available for him. The shop owner tells Bruce, as requested, explosives, modified rubber bullets, beanbags, the works. Bruce asks, "Non-lethal?" And the shop owner tells him, "Less lethal," to which Bruce responds, "That'll work." Then as Bruce is handing the shop owner a wad of cash, the old man says, "I should know better than to ask, but what's all this for?" And in stereotypical fashion, Bruce just says, "I've got my needs." The shop owner gets the hint and just takes the money, but Bruce then asks him, "That large project on the edge of town, what's going on?" The shop owner tells him, "Some company came in with big money and big promises. 3 months into construction, they up and left. Who knows why? What's left is what you saw when you drove drove in. Bruce then asks him where all the people were from, but the man says, I don't know, came looking for something better, didn't find it. But as he's saying this, they hear somebody start to yell, we weren't doing anything, stop, followed by other voices saying, we told you, you can't be here. Bruce then goes to help, but the old shop owner says, leave that alone, son, nothing you can do. But to nobody's surprise, Bruce completely ignores him and peeks around the corner to see what's going on in the alleyway. There he sees three men wearing pig masks assaulting a mother and her young son. One of the men then says again, you're the one that doesn't belong, as another one of the attackers rips the backpack from the young boy and starts dumping it upside down, telling him, time to grow up, kid, get ready for a beating. But the beating that starts is not the one they expected, as Bruce completely lays waste to the dude who was stealing the kid's bag. The other two then turn to Bruce and say, bro, you just made a big mistake. But Bruce responds, we'll see. But before Bruce can react, the old shop owner comes up behind him and slams him in the head with a wrench, followed by telling him, shoulda listened, city boy. A man named DJ, who we find out is the leader of this extremist group, then comes up saying, what do we have here? The old shop owner says, out-of-towner, savior complex. Bruce then comes to and tells the mother and the son to run, followed by DJ walking up saying, oh, I love city boys, and kicking Bruce in the ribs. Now, right from the jump, this dude just reeks of Negan energy from The Walking Dead, and he leans over and he tells Bruce, hey, chin up, man, it's your lucky day. Tonight is when we get to pay back this horrible city that turned its back on our boys and embraced the swill. All that changes now, starting with you, followed by the four men beginning to stomp the crap out of Bruce. Well, remember that priest I pointed out earlier? Well, he comes running in and dives over top of Bruce while screaming, stop. The four men pull back because they don't want to kick the priest, but one of them says, Father Peters, get out of the way. But the priest refuses and he reaches out his hand responding, Jeffrey, I've known you since before you could walk. This is not you. And this act of courage and undeserved grace snaps this dude back to his senses as he lifts the pig mask with a startled look on his face. The rest of them then jump on their motorcycles as DJ yells, leave these dudes on the ground where they belong. Let's do what we came here to do, and they speed off. We are then taken to the home of Father Peters, where we see Bruce is recovering on his couch and the father is looking after him. Bruce grunts in pain and the father says, I hope you don't mind, the hospital is a good hour away. They really got you good, got us good, I should say. Bruce then slowly sits up and says, won't happen again. But the priest has the look on his face of a man who's been through this before. Bruce then notices an old picture on the side table of the priest marching against violence. He asks him, is this you? To which Father Peters responds, a long time ago now. I made a lot of friends during that time, all of us chasing peace, a never-ending journey it seems. Bruce then sets the picture back and asks, the tattoo on the boy's arms, what's it mean? Father Peters tells him, 6 months ago we had an outsider come, recruiting. I don't know much about him except that he's been filling the holes in the hearts of our boys, all of the men here really. He's given them a dark place to go to. Bruce then mentions that they said something was happening soon, and the priest replies, the boy and his mother, they're from an encampment. They plan to run them all out of town tonight by any means necessary. But that's all Bruce needed to hear as he grabs his shirt and starts to head out. Father Peters tries to ask him where he's going, but Bruce just says, stay here. But when they walk outside, Bruce sees that his truck has been completely destroyed and torched. But Bruce just loads it up anyway as the priest asks him, what are you gonna do? Bruce then looks up and says, sometimes peace isn't an option. Sometimes words don't work, as we turn the page and find this group of men approaching the homeless encampment. We then see two police officers pull up and get out of the car while telling DJ, you know we can't let you do this. And as they approach DJ, the three of them just bust out laughing, revealing that the cops are actually with them. DJ hands them their masks and says, good to have you here, brothers. Good to have you all here. Now let's clean up this town. And remember I said he's giving off full Negan vibes? Well, he's even got a barbed wire wrapped bat. So Warren Johnson definitely wanted to send a clear message of exactly who this dude is. And over the next few panels, we get a horrific scene of these extremists invading the homeless encampment and beating the innocent people senseless. And as he's beating people with his bat, DJ is screaming, I am the new truth, I am power. And just as he's about to bring his weapon down on another person, Absolute Batman comes flying in and breaks his arm in half, which I have to admit is a very rewarding splash page at this moment in the story. And after immobilizing their leader, Absolute Batman goes on the attack against the rest of the group, starting with kicking a dude so hard in the chin he almost snaps his head off, followed by pile driving one of the corrupt cops into the ground. But Batman is frozen in his tracks as he sees the old shop owner has a gun to the head of that young boy he saw earlier, and he's saying, don't come any closer, man, I'll do it, threatening to shoot the boy if Batman takes another step. But this version of Batman is a total savage, so he just chucks 3 batarangs into the old man's face, followed by administering a flying knee that basically flattens this dude's head. It's insane. Every single impact from Absolute Batman against one of his opponents is shown to be totally devastating. The art throughout all of these fights does such a great job of showing just how powerful and vicious Absolute Batman is, and it's just amazing. And speaking of, on the very next panel, we see a rage-fueled Absolute Batman approaching the extremist leader who's crawling to reach for his gun. He then reaches the gun, turns and fires at Batman while screaming, "Get away!" But the bullet just whizzes by Bruce's head, who doesn't flinch, by the way, and Absolute Batman just begins to lay into this dude. And he does not stop with one punch. He's dropping blow after blow after blow with blood splattering everywhere. But this is where Father Peter's impact on Bruce really comes into play, as he comes flying in yet again and dives over top of DJ, the extremist leader. He's screaming once again for the violence to stop, but this time it's Bruce doing the beating. Bruce grits his teeth and asks the father, "What are you doing?" And the priest tells him, "This won't fix it. It won't. I don't know how to make it better. I only know how not to make it worse." Then as we see Bruce gritting his teeth and standing over the priest, Father Peters begs him, saying, "Please, this isn't the way." But despite his pleading, Bruce remains overcome by rage, and he screams, "This is my way." From here we see that some of the members of the extremist group who had attacked the homeless encampment have escaped and have raced back to their headquarters screaming, "Boys, he got DJ." We then see more members of the gang coming out of the house saying, "What are you talking about?" With the returning members telling them, "He came out of nowhere, man. Somebody came at us. Someone huge." And as this is happening, we simultaneously see Batman walking through the rain, finding a set of keys, and looking up to discover the dump truck that becomes his Batmobile, somewhat hidden amongst the crumbling buildings. Yes, that's right. This story also gives us the origin for Absolute Batman's dump truck Batmobile in this universe, which is another one of the reasons why this story is the one we're focusing on. Anyway, as Batman jumps in the dump truck and revs it up, we see several members of the extremist group are trying to gather more weapons to go after Batman. And the conversation tells us that they weren't able to gather anything from the pawn shop because Batman had already torched it, followed by one of them looking out the window and saying, "Oh my God," before taking off running, screaming, "Get back, get back." But there was no time, as we get a splash page of Absolute Batman demolishing this entire building and everyone in it. So for any of you who have been wondering whether this version of Batman was willing to violate the no-kill rule, this story answers that question. Not only was he about to beat the extremist leader to death, he just basically killed multiple members of the group with the dump truck. And his rage-filled violence does not stop there, as we see him kick the door open of the dump truck and jump out and start going to work on these dudes in their headquarters with his bat axe. The gang members attempt to shoot at Batman, but it is no use. And this leads us back to the foreshadowing moment that we saw at the very beginning of this story. Because as Batman drops his axe and one of the gang members who's pinned against the wall says, "Get back, man, you can't do this. We're human beings," Batman just responds saying, "No, you're roaches," as he pulls out the flamethrower we saw earlier and says, "Only one way to deal with those." And with that, he unleashes hell on the gang's headquarters as we see their extremist flag burn. So again, this really demonstrates the level of rage that fills this version of Bruce Wayne Batman. In the present timeline for Absolute Batman, he's filled with the same venom from Arkham that fuels Absolute Bane. And while we've seen that cause him to rage out in recent issues, it really only fuels the rage that's already there. And we've seen the evidence of that throughout this entire series, which really makes a lot of sense when you consider that this entire universe was built by Darkseid, which means that it is likely governed by the same hate and rage-filled Omega energy that fuels Darkseid himself. However, on the next page, as Batman stands over the charred remains of his actions, Father Peters emerges once again, this time with a first aid bag. Batman then watches in shock as Father Peters begins to tend to the wounds of the surviving gang members. He wraps one of their arms as they whimper, "It hurts," to which the priest replies, "I know, son, stay still." All Batman can think to ask is why, and Father Peters just tells him, "You have your way and I have mine." But it's these actions from Father Peters that act like an echo for his father's words and sensibilities from when Bruce was a child. And as we see a now much calmer Bruce sitting there thinking about everything that just happened, we see him remembering his conversation with his father where he told him, "You did a lot of cool stuff when you were younger, Dad." Thomas then replies, "I don't know about that." But Bruce responds, "You made a difference. You did something. I'm gonna do that too." We then see two panels intercut of Absolute Batman sitting there staring at the fire he just created, alongside himself as a boy turning to his father saying, "I'm gonna be just like you." And this, my friends, is the craziest part of this story that brings the whole thing full circle, as we see that the picture Bruce was looking at with his dad all those years ago was the same picture that he found in Father Peters' house. And it was in fact Thomas Wayne and Father Peters locked arm in arm facing down injustice in that picture. That is just great writing and an incredible payoff. And as we see Bruce say, I just have to figure out how, meaning how he's going to make a difference. We see what his father responded to him. As we see Thomas say, that was before the mustache. We barely knew what we were doing then, but I guess I barely know what I'm doing now. But you, Bruce, I know your nature. I know who you are deep down. You have a strong and compassionate heart. All you have to do is be yourself. We then see Absolute Batman look down at the blood on his hands, followed by his father looking into young Bruce's eyes as he finishes saying, no matter what you do, I'll always be proud of you. And on the final page, we see Bruce crouched down in front of the dump truck with his head between his arms. Like I already said a couple of times, guys, this is an incredible story and addition to Absolute Batman's mythos. Daniel Warren Johnson really did an incredible job of exploring the two main driving factors for this version of Bruce Wayne / Absolute Batman, which is this underlying trauma-induced rage alongside a deep desire to live up to his father's legacy of empathy and compassion, and how those two things are constantly warring against each other. It's crazy compelling stuff, and we are at the point now with the Absolute Batman run where we can honestly say this is amongst the best Batman stories ever told. But like I said, the book does not end there, and we are taken to a secondary story called Sanctuary, written by James Harren. This story essentially just expands on Batman's early interaction with Black Mask and his gang as both began to emerge in Gotham. There's not as much to take away from this story as there is the first, in my opinion. However, we are introduced to one of Black Mask's henchmen, who is likely one of the early victims of Arkham's experimentation. He's nowhere near the threat level of Bane, so Arkham is clearly in the early stages of developing their Venom serum. So when Batman arrives at the church where the goons are tormenting people, he makes quick work of the Arkham experiment. And lastly, there's a 2-page add-on at the end of this book called Let's Learn About Bats that hints at something, but I'm not really sure what it is, and we're going to have to see how it develops later on. But again, the Star of Absolute Batman Annual 1 was the first story by Daniel Warren Johnson. The way it expanded our understanding of Absolute Batman and his psychology was great, and the action throughout was savage, brutal, and so well done. So all in all, this first Absolute Batman not written by Scott Snyder was a success. And now it's on to Absolute Batman 14 and his final showdown with Bane, which drops just before Thanksgiving. But sound off in the comments below and let us know what you guys thought of this book and what you think it might mean for how things play out in the next issue. Other than that, we will see you next time when we talk about all things comics.